This time we're going to tie the same fly that we did previously, but in a parachute version. And the first thing to do is attach the thread to the hook. You don't need to make touching turns all the way down, just about halfway down the hook shank, and come back, because the first thing we're going to do is tie in the parachute post. I actually happen to like parachute flies to have a bit of a head on them. That to me is more like the real thing, more like the real proportions. So I'm going to put the parachute posts about a quarter of the way back the hook shank and leave a little bit of space to build up a head for the fly shortly. And we're going to use the loop method. Take some poly yarn and split it to get what you think is the right amount of yarn. Remember, you're going to have double the volume once we wrap it around the hook. Wrap the yarn around the hook like that. Make one wrap of thread around the post, and now you can actually move the post and put it where you want it. You can actually adjust it a little bit further forward. That'll do. And there's the post basically tied in already. With the post in place, we're just going to reinforce the base of it with some turns of thread so it doesn't slide. And then we're going to start making touching turns up the post to build something that we can wind the hackle onto later. And remember that thing about holding the post whilst you're wrapping, pulling tight, and back off the thread tension. When you're not pulling tight, make touching turns back down again. And there's the post in place. The way that I do these parachutes is to tie in the hackle now, at the beginning of the process of tying the fly, but only wind it later. Tie in the hackle stalk with one wrap of thread like that. Remember to leave a little bit of bare stalk here. Transfer the rotation of the thread around the post and just let the thread kick the hackle up onto the post and bring the thread back down again. It's better if you stop your thread just short of the top of the post and make it a little bit easier to wind the hackle later on. And then without doing anything fancy, you're going to change the rotation of the thread back to around the hook shank and just catch in the tag of that hackle. And that way you don't need to cut it, and it'll help build up a slightly bigger, slightly neater body for you. Now we're going to tie in some tail fibers. And of course, unlike the standard dry fly, the length of tail doesn't really impact on the way the fly behaves in the same way. It's nice to have them longish, but you can vary them now without affecting the way the fly sits. I'm just going to trim off the butts of those. And we're going to tie the same fly that we did previously in a parachute version. So we're going to use black superfine dubbing, and we're also going to add a rib just so that it's the same pattern, so you can see the comparison. So tie in some mylar for the rib. You obviously don't want anything too heavy for the ribbing on a dry fly. Oops, I just bumped the tail there a little bit. That's better. I'm going to add a little bit of superfine dubbing. Spin it onto the thread and just build a smooth body. Oops, I just didn't quite catch in that tail fibre. Now, you see I'm a bit more fussy with the dry flies than I am with the nymphs when it comes to winding the body material. And then rib through it, keep that post material out the way. We'll tie that off. We're just going to trim off the rest of that ribbing. And here's the interesting thing, they do it slightly differently, is that we're going to build the thorax of dubbing. Take one around the post like that. Take it up to the eye to form a head for the fly and bring it back. Add a little tiny bit more. Because mayflies do have heads in front of their wings. And then this is very important, you transfer the rotation of the thread with one turn around the post, like that, before we wind the hackle. Now to facilitate winding the hackle, we're going to tip the fly in the vise at a slight angle. Separate the hackle from the post fibre. Attach the hackle pliers to the hackle. And rotate or wrap once around the hackle, around the post. Make sure that the first wrap starts to move down the post, and then it will just follow on. Normally with a parachute post, a parachute fly, you don't need to over hackle it. Leave the hackle hanging in the hackle pliers and make one wrap of thread around the post. That's enough to hold it still and trim off the excess. Now we're going to secure this with a super glue whip finish. You can actually whip finish around the post, but this is much quicker and very durable. A little tiny bit of super glue to moisten the thread. 2 wraps underneath the hackle around the post. Support it with your fingers and pull tight for a couple of seconds. We can trim that off. Then finally we're going to put the fly back in the vise the correct way around. I'm going to trim out 1 or 2 fibres that we caught up when we were whip finishing. There you go. Pull the post fibres all in one go and trim it to length. And there's your parachute dry fly. So effectively it's the same pattern that we tied in the standard version, but now tied in a parachute version. Very neat. Actually very quick once you get used to doing it. And I probably tie a lot more parachute flies these days than I do standard dry flies. If only because they're easier to see on false water. But by changing the colour scheme, you can imitate just about any upwing dry fly, and with a bit of modification even some caddis flies.